Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome. I see people coming in. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to give a few minutes to get started, let folks arrive and settle in. Thank you for joining us today for our teach-in. Palestine is a queer issue, resisting pinkwashing now and until liberation. Thanks for joining us. I see people coming in. We're going to get started in just a couple minutes. We're just letting folks arrive. Thanks for being here. All right, thanks for being here, y'all. Gonna get started in just a minute. Hey, back in, folks, just give me a thumbs up when you think I should get started, maybe on the thread. Thank you for being here, everybody. Thanks for joining us for our teach-in. Palestine is a queer issue, resisting pinkwashing now and until liberation. We're excited to have you here. We're honored to be in followership and in learning from an amazing group of Palestinian and allies today. So thanks for taking the time to learn with us. We're going to get started in just a moment. Folks are still filing in. We're going to start in 1 minute. So grab a coffee, grab your tea, grab your blanket, whatever you need to dig in with us. We'll be together for the next hour and a half. We've got an amazing group of speakers, Palestinian speakers, that will be joining us today. So, yes. Okay, we'll start. Bismillah. Thank you all so much for being here today. Welcome to the Resisting Pinkwashing Now Until Liberation teach-in. Queer Crescent is honored to host this teach-in in partnership with the Palestinian Feminist Collective, Lavender Phoenix, the Muslim Alliance for Gender and Sexual Diversity, or MASGD, Teaching Palestine, and AMED Ethnic Studies. We're really grateful to have you here today. And the Arab and Muslim, I'm getting one last partner in Arab and Muslim ethnicities and diaspora studies. Thank you, Rabab. Thank you all so much for joining us today and for tuning in. My name is Shenaaz Janmohamed. I use she and they pronouns. I'm the executive director of Queer Crescent. Queer Crescent is really thrilled to offer this teach-in and to be in learning with you all for the next hour and a half on pinkwashing in particular, as we hold grief and rage and mourn towards healing, towards resistance, towards a free Palestine. Joining the resounding people all across the world who have been calling for a permanent ceasefire, to not let the violence and the destruction of Gaza go without our clear and determined voice to say that this is not okay, that our tax dollars should not be paying for this, that we do not consent to genocide. And as queer people, as trans people, it is very much a queer issue to be in solidarity with Palestine. For the next hour and a half, we will take time to learn from Palestinian organizers in Palestine, in the US, around the ways in which this moment can be used to understand our relationship to pinkwashing in particular, and to Palestinian solidarity in general. And so thank you again for being with us today. One last, okay, so a note on accessibility. So one of Queer Crescent's political principles, which is shaped by disability justice frameworks and disabled organizers who are part of our communities and movements, is that we strive to eliminate any and all barriers to the full rights, agencies, and freedom of movement of all people through radical accessibility and bodily autonomy. And it feels really important to start with accessibility. And we have captions that are part of the webinar today, so please select that. And I just want to name that we are still stretching towards like deeper accessibility, deeper inclusivity. It's a constant kind of project to get closer to this practice of including all parts of our communities, all parts of ourselves. So in addition to the captioning option, we also have an amazing digital security team on the back end, Queer Crescent staff, Saba, Amara, Faizan, thank you all so deeply, so much, who are helping us stay safe on the back end from any disruption from haters and Zionists and whoever who might be here who are trying to disrupt our time together. And so thank you for holding down that piece of accessibility to ensure that this can be a space where we can be in our learning and our curiosity together. We're also going to record this teach-in and share it with all the folks who have registered. We had over 350 people who registered for today. And so for those who were not able to make it today to the actual teach-in, we will share the recording and we'll post on YouTube so that people can come back to this or share it with their networks so that we can continue the learning and the commitments. We're going to start our teach-in with poetry, because we deeply believe as queer Muslims, as a queer Muslim organization, we deeply believe in the power of cultural work, cultural change, and imparting our shine as queer people into the culture. That is the way that our people have survived. That is the way that people share their histories, their survivalship is through culture. And so before I bring up Yaffa, who's a dear friend and comrade, and is also the executive director of MASGD, the Muslim Alliance for Gender and Sexual Diversity, let me introduce Yaffa. So Yaffa, they, she, is a trans Muslim and displaced Indigenous Palestinian. She is sharing poetry from her new book, Blood Orange, shout it out, please get a copy if you haven't already, which is an emotional, important, and timely poetry collection. Their writings probe the yearning for home, belonging, mental health, queerness, transness, and other dimensions of marginalization while nurturing dreams of utopia against the background of ongoing displacement and genocide of Indigenous people. Please join me in giving some shine, energetic shine to Yaffa, and I'll pass to you.
Thank you so much for that. Hi, everyone. It's so nice to be here with you all. So excited to share space with all of you, with all the incredible panelists, with the entire Queer Crescent team. Y'all are just incredible. Actually, like right before this, me and one of the other panelists realized we could potentially be related. So that's like the beauty of having spaces like this, where you connect with people that you've kind of been missing your entire life, but you didn't even know that they were missing. So I'm excited to recite some poetry for you all for my new collection. Just a little bit about the collection before I recite some poetry. So this collection was written, for the most part, on the weekend of October 13th to the 15th. So if some of y'all might remember that there was an eclipse during that weekend, and I really wanted to find something that would really center queer and trans Palestinian experience in particular, and also would just support me in navigating my own processing of everything that's going on. I have family both in Gaza and the West Bank still. I'm originally from Yaffa and Jenin, but I've kind of lived in 9 different countries. So when I say I'm displaced, it's displacement from various different wars, various genocides, various everything. And the result of that was Blood Orange. And tried to get it out as quickly as possible. And here we are. So the first poem that I'll read is called Healthy. And I'll talk a little bit about each of these poems as after I read them. It's called Healthy. We are not meant to be okay when genocide is our neighbor that is funded by our labor. We are meant to be a mess, our sleep tearing into reality, anxiety brewing, wondering what is hope. We are meant to tear at the seams of reality, realizing a reality built on oppression is bullshit. We are meant to realize and demand all we are worth: self-actualization, wholeness, things systems built off of genocide can never. Our response, labeled by Western capitalism as wrong, is healthy. We move to wholeness always. They move to pain, attempting to drag us with them. So this was actually the very first poem that I wrote for this collection, and it was in that first week of the genocide, immediately following October 7th, when so many people were really struggling with what do we do with all of this, right? We're witnessing an entire genocide right before our eyes, and what do we do? And there was a lot of hopelessness going around, and a lot of narratives, at least in like what's known as the United States and the global North, that's always told us that all of that is wrong, that we're not supposed to be overwhelmed by things. But for me, with all the practices that I have, it's actually healthy to be overwhelmed right now. We're not supposed to know how to let genocide live in our bodies with ease. We still show up, we still do the things, and yet at the same time, we honor it, that it is a large experience. This is not normal. This is not something that should be happening all the time or ever. And so really wanted to honor that of the world that we live in is not what we deserve. And so for us to be overwhelmed right now is actually healthy, is where we should be. So the second poem I will read kind of goes into the conversation of today around pinkwashing. And so this one's called At Odds. My transness and a colonized perception of Palestine are at odds. They think it's because of Islam, lack of modernity. I say I have only received death threats targeting my transness from white people, Zionists, and other various political affiliations. I say only the white people around me have ever disowned their own, yet I do not talk to sisters who choose to buy into imperialist transphobia, claiming it as their own. My parents do not understand how some of their children could hate anything any of their children could be, why anyone would hate what they do not know. So I won't talk much about pinkwashing because I know we'll get to that today. But in particular, most queer and trans Palestinians over these last 8 weeks have been receiving such immense violence from the broader LGBTQ community, telling us that our people are the ones who are going to kill us. And I've been receiving death threats my entire life, in particular as an organizer since I was 19. And I have literally never received a death threat from anyone from our region, from any Muslim person. It has always been white people who have sent me death threats specifically for my queerness and my transness, let alone everything else. And so that poem just kind of honors that experience. And then I'll read one more, and I'll say just a few words before I read this last one. So for me, the arts are so important, not just as a tool for resistance, but also as a tool for world building. Often we think of the world as what creates art, rather than art is what creates the world. And if you look at literature, even with Zionism, Zionism was in literature 100 years before it was ever named. And so I think about that of what is the world that we are building? What is the world of tomorrow that we get to write about and paint about and do all different kinds of art forms about today? And so this last poem kind of brings a little bit of that into it. And the collection, the collection goes into the topic of utopia as we're exploring all of these other things and as we're experiencing this genocide. So this last poem is called Land Back. I do not know names wiped from time in Gaza, like I do not remember the names of great uncles and aunts who have been reclaimed by our land. To say they were murdered is to claim loss that our land will never feel. For we are made of her, and regardless of how many layers of phosphor fill the air, we return to her in our deaths. They may exacerbate the process of our return, but return we shall. Standing thousands of miles away, I know even here she will take me back, for distance is a creation that is buried with bodies that were never ours. We are not the ones who take land back, it is land that takes us. There will come a day when the sun sets on a world and rises in another, when indigenous sovereignty is honored, where queerness no longer exists, where transness is no longer an identity, where humanity means something genuine. So I wanted to end with that, just on a note of everything that we're doing right now. All of the resistance is world building. We're building the world that we have always deserved. So I'll leave you all with just one final thing about the book. So like I mentioned, the reason I wrote this book in the first place and published it is to raise awareness about queer and trans Palestinians in particular and our experiences, and also to fundraise for queer and trans Palestinians, both on the grounds in Gaza and in the diaspora. And so 100% of all of the proceeds from Blood Orange go directly towards that. And I will say, as we're getting deeper and deeper into this, the needs of the queer and trans Palestinian community is getting so immense, both on the ground in the region and in the diaspora. Over just the last few days, I've received over $20,000 worth of requests from individuals because people are being doxxed, people are receiving death threats, people are losing their jobs. In one case, people are losing their children. There's a lot happening. And so just wanted to leave with that I want to invite you all to pay attention to those needs and honor them, especially as we go into next year and into the elections. Thank you again for having me. It was such a pleasure to be here. And I'm so excited for the rest of this.
Thank you so much, Yaffa. It's so important. It's so wonderful to have you here. And it feels so important to start our teach-in with the ways in which poetry, culture moves and inspires us. It opens our hearts in ways that feel both like healing and necessary as part and parcel to our organizing, as part and parcel to our deep learning, to, as my comrade and coworker Saba says, to growing our empathy, to be able to show up with more depth, more commitment, and more resolve towards these issues, because we are deeply interconnected. So thank you again, Yaffa. Before I turn to introduce our other panelists, I wanted to just ground us for a moment in why Queer Crescent, along with the many partners that I named at the beginning of our time together, felt it was important to host this teach-in. So back on November 3rd, in Queer Crescent, in collaboration with the Palestinian Feminist Collective, drafted and released a letter calling upon LGBTQI organizations, leaders, and influencers to join Queer Crescent and Palestinians in calling for an immediate ceasefire and in particular to take up understanding and resisting pinkwashing as a queer issue. The frame, Palestine is a queer issue, is very much in the line and homage of Palestinian Feminist Collective, who tirelessly make the links around gender justice, bodily autonomy, self-determination, sovereignty, to the project of Palestinian liberation, seeing them as part and parcel of the same project of liberation. And we very much are inspired and in deep gratitude to PFC and all the tireless folks who make those links so clear and apparent to us. We are also in deep gratitude to organizations like Al-Qaus, who are based in Palestine, who have been telling us about pinkwashing for a long, long time. And we are finally doing our part to answer the call as an organization, as Queer Crescent. Since we shared this letter, over 350 individuals have signed on. Over 65 organizations have joined us in a commitment to calling for permanent ceasefire. This teach-in is part of our commitment to moving those who have signed, ourselves included, and the many others who have joined us today, to deepen our shared resolve to a free Palestine through learning about pinkwashing as a propaganda tool of Israel and settler colonial state violence, and to allow this moment to transform us so that the grief is not in vain, towards a more fierce, committed, and clear stance of solidarity with Palestinian liberation movement. As queer and trans people and within LGBTQI organizations, we have a distinct role to play to organize to undermine pinkwashing. Because pinkwashing works and functions on the backs of racist tropes of Palestinians, Arabs, Swana, and Muslims more broadly. We cannot let our vulnerabilities as trans and queer people be exploited in the pursuit of colonial violence and the genocide against Palestinians and all Indigenous people. It was not surprising that some of the first folks who signed on to our letter were trans-led organizations like the Transgender Law Center, like El-La, and Indigenous organizations. It's not surprising because I think for folks who are leading trans and Indigenous organizations, the relationship of self-determination, of bodily autonomy, and to state violence and colonization is clear, right? Because ultimately colonization uses gender injustice and creating these wedges within our communities as a way to dampen our resistance and to keep us apart. So I don't want to say more because our amazing speakers will speak and illuminate so much more of these issues, but I wanted to just state why it was important for Queer Crescent to support advancing these conversations. So our first speaker today is Ghadir Shafie. She and her. She is a Palestinian queer activist and the co-founder of ASWAT, Palestinian Feminist Queer Center for Sexual and Gender Freedoms. A passionate advocate for the intersectionality of the struggle of Palestinian queer women, fighting multiple forms of oppression as Palestinians in the context of Israel's system of apartheid, military occupation and settler colonialism, as women in a militaristic and imperialistic male-dominated society, and as queers in the context of pinkwashing and homophobia. Ghadir promotes active solidarity for Palestine through global feminism and with queers. Thank you, Ghadir. Pass it to you.
Thank you so much. Hello from Palestine. Thank you so much for organizing this teaching on pinkwashing. I am grateful for your presence here with me, witnessing in this horrible, horrible time. I will speak today for about 15 minutes, and I want you to bear in mind that since October 7th, Israel has killed over 18,000 Palestinians. That is one Palestinian every 15 minutes. Imagine how many queer people are being killed daily by Israel. The scenes from Gaza are beyond description. They defy comparison, even for Palestinians jaded by decades of occupation and settler colonial violence. Devastated landscape filled with craters and the blackened ruins of what were once people's homes, dead bodies or pieces of them, orphaned children screaming in terror and incomprehension. Desperate survivors crying for food and water, doctors despairing at the ever-growing influx of wounded people they know they cannot treat. As a queer Palestinian, watching these images of horror, one stood out as particularly revolting in a rather different way. It shows an Israeli soldier in the middle of the rubble of one of the many residential neighborhoods in Gaza, flattened by the Israeli indiscriminate military strikes. In the distance, if you can see this image in the slides, in the distance, smoke from Israel's carpet bombings hang in the air. Thank you, the second one. The soldier is surrounded by Israeli tanks and demolish everything in their way. It is a scene of death and destruction. The soldier stands holding a bright new rainbow flag with the words "in the name of love" scribbled across it. The soldier described it as a message of hope. What hope can there be for 2.3 million Palestinians trapped over 16 years in the occupied and besieged Gaza Strip? In the words of UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, Gaza has become a graveyard for Palestinians. They have no water, no food, and no electricity, as Israel has cut off what little it allowed in through its already suffocating siege. They seek shelter from Israeli bombings in hospitals, UN schools, mosques, and churches, only to find these sites targeted by Israeli strikes. Those who can flee their homes along Israeli designated safe corridors, only to have their vehicles shelled by the Israeli IDF soldiers. It seems incomprehensible that an Israeli soldier would pose a photo with a rainbow flag while participating in his army's mass slaughter of Palestinians and destruction of half of Gaza's homes. The truth is more sinister yet. This stunt, which was shared online by the Israeli state official social media accounts, is a textbook example of obscene colonial pinkwashing. More than that, it is a pinkwashing on steroids. For years, Palestinian queers have denounced Israel's pinkwashing, a cynical strategy designed to use self-proclaimed support for LGBTQIA+ rights as a pink smokescreen to conceal its 75 years regime of apartheid, which oppresses all Palestinians, no matter of our gender or sexual orientation, all the while singling out queer Palestinians for persecution and blackmail. It is an attempt to falsely depict Israel as modern and liberal, and a liberal country, while diverting attention from its alignment with far-right homophobic regimes and groups around the world and its current fundamentalist, racist, and homophobic government. In addition, Israel's pinkwashing agenda is a colonial tool that has the racist aim to misrepresent Palestinians as backwards, homophobic, and thus not deserving of human rights. It also tries to convince us as queer and trans people that we are somehow foreign in our society and tries to turn us against our Palestinians brothers and sisters. I think there couldn't be any better example of Israeli pinkwashing than the photo that the Israeli soldier with the rainbow flag in the rubble. Israeli pinkwashing has always been dishonest and dangerous. It has always been racist and colonial. It has allowed Israel to continue its ethnic cleansing, besiege, imprisonment, and murder of Palestinians, queer and non-queer alike, for decades. Now it's being used to cover up for genocide. In these dark times, Palestinians in besieged Gaza are bearing the brunt of Israel's full-blown genocidal war and ethnic cleansing. Palestinians in the occupied Palestinian territories of West Bank, meanwhile, are also facing escalating waves of killing, torture by both Israeli military and illegal settlers. Apartheid for Palestinians like myself inside Israel is reaching new peaks as Israeli forces are targeting and suppressing any expression of sympathy with the oppressed. As hard as it is, we still maintain hope. We have no other choice. That hope comes from the grassroots mobilization that are forcing complicit governments and institutions to finally call for the bare minimum that is nevertheless the absolute priority, a ceasefire that will put a stop to Israel's carpet bombing and genocide of Palestinians in Gaza. Queer groups have been extremely instrumental in our struggle for liberation. Queer groups have been an important part of the mobilizations. Nearly 40 LGBTQA+ groups across Southwest Asia and North Africa called for the immediate ceasefire, stating, we stand with justice, equality, progress, and liberty. Throughout my life as a queer activist, I have proudly held the rainbow flag high as a symbol of queer inclusion, queer struggle, queer liberation, queer equality, and queer joy. The Israeli soldier participating in Israel's genocidal war on my people in Gaza has desecrated the flag, has disgraced the flag, and made it a mockery for all it stands for. Queer and trans people and groups are increasingly seeing through the pink smokescreen and rejecting Israel's pinkwashing and its war crimes and crimes against humanity. We will not stand by as our flag and our identities are co-opted and used to justify a genocide. I call upon queer allies around the globe to remember, none of us is free until we are all free. What can we do right now in these terrible times? Since 2005, Palestinians have proposed to you, our friends around the world, an entirely nonviolent method of ending Israel's power over our lives. An academic and cultural boycott of Israel. This strategy is known as BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions. BDS means boycotting all Israeli state-sponsored institutions. This is not aimed at individuals, but at institutions financed by the state and that serve as extensions of the government that occupies us and keeps us under siege. We ask academics, staff, and students not to speak at Israeli state-funding organizations, including universities. We ask artists and cultural workers not to perform in apartheid Israel. Make sure that your universities are divested from Israeli money. Do not take Israeli money for your conferences or film festivals. Do not accept deceptively free propaganda trips to Israel. End complicity of university with the government of Israel by, among other things, canceling all joint projects and activities that are complicit with Israeli universities. Right now, the main demand is to stop the genocide. Stop the genocide and ask for ceasefire now. So how can queer groups and queer people support queer liberation in Palestine? One way, one effort that is happening right now around the world is Queer Cinema for Palestine. Queer Cinema for Palestine is a vibrant event that happens globally, established in 2021 to support queer art and queer cinema around the world. Today, there are more than 270 filmmakers and artists who signed our pledge to boycott Israeli Film Festival, to boycott Israeli institutions, and support queer liberation in Palestine. Queer Cinema for Palestine is happening online in more than 15 locations around the world from the 2nd until the 10th of December. Under the title, There's No Pride in Genocide, we gather together as artists to support queer cinema for Palestine and the Palestinian struggle for liberation. There's not much to say. I think you've seen the image from Gaza. You've seen what is happening right now. This is not a regular panel on pinkwashing. It's happening during a genocide where pinkwashing is also used to promote genocide. So I ask you as a Palestinian and as a queer Palestinian, please keep talking about Palestine. Palestine is a queer issue. Gaza is a queer issue. And there's no queer justice until we are all free. Thank you so much for organizing this, and thank you so much for your work and activism on Palestine. You are saving lives right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ghadir. Thank you so much for your passion, your commitment, reminding us that hope is an active choice that you are engaging in every day, despite all the odds, because that is the story of survival. Thank you for reminding and being so clear in the link to BDS, Boycott, Divestment, and Sanction Movement, as tangible ways that we could be in solidarity with Palestine and to chip at the far-reaching power of the Israeli state and settler colonial project. Thank you for showing the ways in which queer folks and queer organizations use culture and art to tell different stories of survival with the queer cinema for Palestine. And thank you for showing up and being here with us. Thank you for all the ways that you hold communities, your fullness, and you are taking time to share and to lead us today. Thank you so much. Wishing so much protection and safety to you and yours. I want to remind folks, I didn't say this earlier, but we will be having a Q&A at the end of this teach-in. So please, there is a little Q&A button that you can push and enter in a question. When you do submit a question, please let us know if it's for the general panel or if it's a particular presenter. But please let your questions come in. We're going to have time at the end to really hear from folks and to really, we want this teach-in to move us, to mobilize us. And so get specific and ask questions that you're contending around, like how to show up more, how to move your organization, how to really like double down on pinkwashing within your formation. Like, please ask the questions. This is the time. Okay, again, thank you, Ghadir. Next, we have Rabab Abdulhadi. Rabab Abdulhadi, she, her, is an internationally known scholar and distinguished professor and researcher. Her scholarship, pedagogy, and public activism focus on Palestine, Arab and Muslim communities and their diasporas, transnational feminisms, and gender and sexuality studies. She is the director and senior scholar in the Arab and Muslim ethnicities and diaspora studies and associate professor of ethnic studies, race and resistance studies at the Historic College of Ethnic Studies, San Francisco State University. She is also a treasure, a beloved teacher, organizer here in the Bay. I feel really grateful that you're here with us today for all the work, all the times that you've taught me. So it's really such an honor to be able to host you and invite you in. Rabab.
Thank you so much, Shenaaz. And I begin by acknowledging that my own university, San Francisco State University, sits on stolen indigenous Ohlone people's land. And I'm now on the East Coast of the United States, where I am also present on the Lenapes people land that has been stolen and people have been displaced, just like it is in Palestine. I also want to thank Queer Crescent for organizing this with the Palestinian Feminist Collective and actually joining with Palestinian voices. I'm very happy that my colleague, my sister, my sibling, Ghadir, was able to join us and has actually taken a lot of the things that I was going to focus on, right? And so I'm going to actually, and thank you, Yaffa, for especially naming even your poetry orange, blood oranges, because we know what oranges mean and how they have been used. And many Palestinians can't even eat oranges because it reminds them of the orchards that they've lost back home. So I wanted to, I'll speak about, I'm going to skip some of the things that Ghadir talked about. So I start, if you don't mind, just putting the first slide on. Yeah, and so this is a slide, if people can see it. This is actually was done in 2013, and it was organized by a group of underground artists, called themselves cultural jammers, and to remake all the campaign that was at the time by Pamela Geller and other Zionist groups doing all the smearing and buying sites on the buses and so on. And the reason I mention also, because there is a connection between the cultural jammers and also the whole naming of pinkwashing, because pinkwashing, some people say, well, it emerged in definitely in Palestine. Some people say it emerged in the US. Some people talk about the whole question of washing and then the question of pink and so on. And I think for me as a researcher, as a scholar, it's very, very interesting because there are so many origins of every single way that we are having the struggles. And so the colonial boundaries and borders that the colonialists and settler colonists try to impose upon us don't really work, because we cross these borders, at least maybe imaginary, maybe in our networks and so on. So but why is it that pinkwashing persists? Ghadir spoke a lot about it. I'm just going to just emphasize a couple of things, is that it is necessary, very important for Israel, public relations. Public relations is a very important project for Israel. This is why Israel consistently demands of the Palestinians and the Arab countries and the world not only to recognize Israel's right to exist, but to recognize Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state, which in itself a very racist notion. And this is very much connected with the genocide that we're seeing now in Gaza, that also we have seen for 75 years of Nakba and for over 100 years of colonization of Palestine. Because the slogan by the Zionist movement was a land without people, for a people without a land. We can talk about for people without the land a little bit later, but let's talk about a land without people. In order to accomplish that and legitimize it, you have to erase the people. You have to erase them. You have to erase their presence. You have to also discredit their discourse, their work, their culture, their interaction, their social relations, in order for you to present yourself as Israel does. And as Ghadir mentioned, as a modern state that is making the desert bloom, which we know is not true, and also that is, by contrast, is the best friend of women and queer people as a gay haven, as opposed to, quote unquote, the backward, savage, excessively homophobic, excessively misogynist Arab world, Arab and Muslim world, and in which Arab men and Arab and Muslim and Palestinian men are presented as irrational, bloodthirsty, misogynist, haters of women and queer people, and as women as being docile, as being only oppressed constantly and need to be rescued by the colonists who will come in and basically realize what Gayatri Spivak spoke about, I don't know, 30 years ago, Candace Subaltern speak, the colonist project of trying to save brown people from brown communities and queer people from their own queer communities. And so in order for this to work, it has to be presented in all of these things. That it is necessarily, and it's very important for Israel to focus on its public relations. And this is something that has been actually very part and parcel of, since the foundation of the State of Israel in 1948, a task that was assigned to the military, to the security of interior affairs, to the Mossad, which is the CIA, outside intelligence, Shem Beit, the internal intelligence, to everybody. And now we see more and more the Ministry of Strategic Affairs and other is, and the whole question of quote unquote branding, which I put it in parentheses because branding also refers to the ways in which slavery, people engaged in slavery actually used to quote unquote brand people whose lives they owned. So I put it in parentheses, I question it, but Israel is very big on that, to kind of like brand Israel as a gay haven, Israel as a best liberator of women, and so on. And this is also what we see today in the sense of Israel actually making a very public relation campaign and a very, very intensive campaign to claim that Palestinians have chopped off the head of children, which was even reiterated by the President of the United States without even thinking about it, because he was quoting Israeli officials who we know are not really known for telling the truth. And then they had to retract it the second day. But yesterday, he repeated the same thing again and said there is the rape of women and so on, which we do not have any evidence. Until now, we know that a lot of Israeli groups and Zionist groups, like this group Bonat Alternativa and others, are alleging, but we haven't seen any evidence of that. If there is any evidence of that, we will not stand for it. We condemn any kind of violations of gender and sexual justice, of any rights of people, because we believe that gender and sexual justice is part and parcel of the indivisibility of justice. So this is not something we are trying to cover up or hide, but this is very much part and parcel of the Israeli propaganda and its churning machine, the Hasbara machine, is everywhere else, and they keep changing their stories. And if we have time, we can actually go over how each story has developed and moved from one place to the other. So I'm also talking about the ways in which colonial feminisms, or colonial quote-unquote feminism, because feminism is supposed to be about the liberation of women as part of liberation of everybody, have been very much engaged in. But within that, there is also the notion of blaming the victim. It is a very important aspect of it. So in order for the Israeli and the Zionist narrative to work, you have to blame people. And one of the very well-known cases, for example, was the case of Mohammed Abu Khadir, the young Palestinian teenager who was kidnapped from in front of his house on July 2nd, 2014, right around the big 2014 war on Gaza we talked about, and kidnapped by Israeli settlers who took him to a forest in Jerusalem that was built on the ruins of the village of Deir Yassin, where the massacre on April 8th, 1948 happened, in order to facilitate the creation of the Israeli state. And they made him drink kerosene and set him on fire and burned him alive, which was a clear case of lynching. Now, what Israeli police tried to do was to actually say that Mohammed Abu Khadir was killed by his own family to quote-unquote salvage family honor. And they killed him because he was queer. And now, if it wasn't for his father, who had videotapes of the security cameras outside of the house and showed it, and the Israeli police tried to confiscate it and basically destroy it, showed that these people came and kidnapped him, the narrative would still be among colonists, among racists, among white supremacists, Zionists, that Palestinians are killing Palestinians, and they are doing this all the time. So it's not only blaming the victim, but it also instilling and reinforcing the narrative of people, not only Palestinians. This happens with all indigenous and all colonized communities and all communities of color from time immemorial. You look at the history of the United States, this is a trope that keeps getting repeated again and again and again. And it's not an easy trope, because it is not something that's only being said. It's not only a discursive issue. It's not a discursive issue that we need to deconstruct in the classroom, because we know the history, including, but recently many people started learning more about the case of Emmett T. Hill, that the young boy who was killed, and the woman who actually accused him came out and said that she lied, but he was killed and he was lynched. And then his mom insisted on having open casket so everybody could see the crime. And there are so many more examples that we don't have time to get into all of them now. But this is part of the colonial narrative, the colonial strategy, in order to discredit the people who are colonized and discredit their struggle. So this is this. And this is, and I mentioned that this is definitely part in Gaza, and it is. But the other thing is that it depends on the narrative of saying that our communities, in particular, as exceptionally sensitive and exceptionally traditional, and this is something that we saw in Abu Ghraib, for example. When they were talking about, we're not going to show the images of Iraqi men are particularly sensitive, but we were raising the question, which men are okay with it? Which women, which anybody, which non-gender binary person, who would be okay with being subjected to sexual and gender violence, to being displaced like this and so on? Nobody will be, but the imaginary that it is trying to instill, that's built on Orientalist, Islamophobic, anti-Arab, anti-Palestinian, anti-Muslim racism as part and parcel of all kinds of racism, basically makes it possible to do a little a small dog whistle in order for you to enforce all of these. And this, we saw this also at the U.S. Social Forum, for example, when a Zionist group Stand With Us, which now everybody knows what it is, tried to do a workshop around queer communities in the Middle East, and many of us objected to it. And the reason that it got through, because the organizers thought that this would be something that would be actually really wonderful, bringing everybody together. They did not really investigate who this group was and what it was doing, and did not coordinate with the many organizations that were at the U.S. Social Forum in 2010 in Detroit, from our own communities, to see what is happening, what's going on. Are you part of this and parcel? And even though the Palestinian queer organizations have existed for a very long time, and I think it was by then, if I'm not mistaken, Ghadir, you can correct me, that we organized a national tour for ASWAT and for Al-Qaws throughout the US in order for people to speak, and you all came and spoke in my own classroom. And I think this is really, and so this is part of the stuff that keeps going back. And this is also the same thing that we hear around this group that I've mentioned now, and this propaganda that's happening. And also in terms of the ways in which also when we passed the resolution on BDS and the National Women's Studies Association 2015, many Zionist groups came out and basically came with the whole question that there is there a place for Zionism and feminism. Many of the feminist groups have been targeted, including the International Women's Strike and so on. And so this is something, this is a continuous, this is a systemic, persistent thing. This is not something that is out of random or accidental. And so what do we do about this? And how am I doing with time? I'm okay, right?
Oh my God, we just want to hear you. We just want to hear you, but 5 more minutes. And
okay,
then
that's fine.
5 more minutes, then we can have some Q&A.
Okay. So what do we do about it? And I think in addition to what Ghadir said, I think it's really, really important for us to say, how do we fight back? We fight back with multiple ways. One of the ways we do, and if you can show the next slide, is, for example, organizing this in the classroom. So one of the things that we do in the Arab and Muslim Ethnicity and Diaspora Studies program, ever since we were founded in 2007, is every single year we were partnering with the Pride Month at San Francisco State to organize sessions on the whole question of queer justice. And this is one of them. Even after San Francisco State stopped funding Pride Month, we continued doing it again and again. This is just one flyer. We have so many of them. And we believe that it's really important to connect the knowledge within the classroom with the knowledge outside and with the activism and advocacy. So we do not separate what happens in the classroom, what happens in the academy from outside. So the academy is not producing knowledge that is divorced from reality, and the people who are organizing are part and parcel of that. And so we've been doing this again and again. The other thing that is really, really important to think about that is how do we work here, for example, and I'm talking here in the diaspora, with groups on the ground, Palestinian queer groups who are working. So one of the examples that I would like to cite from our own experiences is when Al-Qaws was attacked by Palestinian police in Nablus, trying to hold an event, my hometown, Nablus. We were going to rush and say something, but we waited and we coordinated with Al-Qaws and we asked, what should we do? And we did not do anything until Al-Qaws came out, because we were objecting to the whole question of saving queer people from queer communities, saving brown people from brown communities, the whole question of the colonial notion. And we were also taking leadership from the people on the ground who are day in and day out struggling. Once Al-Qaws came out with it, what we did is we published an op-ed in one of the newspapers in the Bay Area, along with QUIT, Queers Undermining Israeli Terrorism, which is a group that has been doing a lot of work for a very long time, and whose founder actually was chosen to be the Grand Marshal of the Gay Pride Parade at San Francisco. And she turned down this honor and said, because I am here in Palestine, struggling with the International Solidarity Movement at the time to oppose the apartheid wall, to oppose the repression by Israel, and so on. So we organized together, and that's when we said we endorse, we support. And this is really important sometimes to think about, how do we take a back road, and when is it we go public with things? At this point, we really need to go public, and we need to defy all this propaganda and that is happening. And so this is part of the things that what does solidarity mean? The next the example, but this is not free. When we do something like this, there is punishment. And these are some of the flyers I'm showing from the Queer Liberation March that took place in 2019. This was the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall uprising. And the Queer Liberation March at that time actually decided to refuse any corporate funding, to refuse to allow the police to go march in their own uniforms and so on, rejected the policing, rejected the state apparatus that represses people, rejected the corporate money and so on. And as a result, by the way, there was space for us to be there. So we organized a big contingent under the banner of Kaya, Queers Against Israeli Apartheid, and also Queers against Islamophobia. And there is another flyer if you show that. And we did a very big thing. And this is the flyer this is the banner that was organized by the group. Zionism equals racism, silence equals death, which is taken from the main group ACT UP. If people kind of, you don't have to have lived there. Remember the history. I know, because they were actually, ACT UP was amazingly supportive and working very closely with Palestine Solidarity, even before the movement now that has sprung up all over the world. So we participated, and I took this banner and I put it on my Facebook page. This led to another Zionist attack, which is trying to silence Palestine, and we're trying to criminalize Palestine in the curriculum, and especially targeting us and targeting our program in particular. And they took it and they said they didn't say what was on the banner. They just said that I'm spreading hate, and thus I should be. They had 86 organizations, some of them are fake organizations, sign it, send it to the university, to the Chancellor of California State University, to the President of San Francisco State, saying that I'm spreading hate. And this is, for them, is hate. Palestine is a queer issue, BDS, Zionism is racism, silence means death. For them, this was something that was very problematic, and it was something that is undermining the Zionist propaganda and the Zionist project of colonizing Palestine and eliminating the Palestinian people, like the genocide that we are seeing here, and trying to continue pushing the pinkwashing without having it exposed. Now, we of course, there was a lot of attacks afterwards as a result. For example, our program has been attacked again and again. The Lawfare Project executive director got on the TV on Fox and Friends and made a lying statement that actually they said that they sued me. Yes, they did sue me, and they sued San Francisco State, and they sued the state of California State University, but we defeated them. It was thrown out of court. It was dismissed with prejudice, but she lied about that. And she said that I'm spreading hate, that I'm one of the leading anti-Semitic. And the Horowitz every single year pushes out a formula about the top anti-Semitic scholars, and they always give me #1. And I think they do it in May because this is the fundraising season for them. But as a result, I started receiving death threats. However, and including to my own university, and death threat voicemails on my office mail that said Muslims will die, which is the same phrase that the guy who killed Wadia al-Fayoumi in Chicago, stabbing him 26 times, he said Muslims will die. The university does not believe that this is actually a viable threat, and they protect, they think that right-wing speech, and which is white supremacist and Zionist, is a protected speech, protected that they can do whatever they want, put up hateful posters, do whatever they want from against us, but we are not allowed to say so. And the university is not investigating also death threat letters that actually came to me through the university president's office to my own office. However, we will not be. This is by the way, you see the sign here, queers celebrate queer Muslims, queers struggling against in Arabic, queers against Islamophobia. And the last, I would like to show the last slide, if you don't mind. You can rush.
And then Rabab, we're going to need to wrap.
Yeah. So this is the last flyer. I say that we actually refuse to be silenced. We refuse to lie down, and so we continued organizing. And one of the main events that we organize, and we do it every year, is this panel, Queer Open Classroom, that everybody can attend and come in. Queer Justice Now, against pinkwashing, exposing it, bringing scholars and activists. Ghadir was one of the people who spoke at that, in order for us to expose these lies, in order for us to support liberation for Palestine as part of liberation of all, and to support gender and sexual justice as part and parcel of the indivisibility of justice. Thank you.
Oh, Rabab, I hope that you can feel all the tremendous gratitude and love that you're getting in the chat. I think that there is such a clear longing to be hearing stories from elders, folks who have been in this fight for so long. Thank you for bringing in the long arc of work as queer Palestinian organizing. Thank you for bringing the long arc and history of queers being in solidarity for Palestine. It's so important that we understand that while this moment is so important for us to like study, learn, and act, it rests upon such a long arc and such a long history of organizing in solidarity with Palestine as queer people, as Palestinian queer people, in solidarity as anti-Zionist Jewish people, in solidarity with Palestine. There is much history and many examples, time after time, in various parts of the world for us to kind of understand, to follow suit, and to be moved by. So thank you. Thank you for also speaking to Mohammed Abdulhadi. Thank you for speaking him into this space. Thank you for speaking about the exceptionalism that is deeply the racist project that links anti-Muslim racism, which Queer Crescent is deeply invested in undermining, linking the ways in which Orientalism and racism against Palestinians, against Arabs, against Muslims is basically what undergirds pinkwashing as a strategy, and to making that really clear that gender justice, racial justice at the nexus is understanding pinkwashing, and resisting pinkwashing is the nexus of racial justice and gender justice. Thank you for reminding us, both you and Ghadir, thank you for both of you reminding us to follow the lead of queer Palestinians. Like, that is what we're trying to do today with you all today with this teach-in, is to really pull us together, circle around, and invite us all to be following the lead of queer Palestinians, those who have been fighting for this, those who have been telling us about this, so that we can take on this work, not wait for Palestinians to tap us, but to see this as inextricably linked to our own liberation, to advance the work of undermining pinkwashing and Zionism as part and parcel to our queer liberation. So thank you so much, Rabab. Our last speaker, before we move to, again, another plug to get at the question and answers, we've got some questions coming in. Thank you all so much. Remember to let us know if it's a question for a particular panelist or is it a question for the whole panel. Our last speaker, before we move to Q&A, Shivani Chanillo with Lavender Phoenix. Okay, Shivani, they, them, is a trans, non-binary, second-generation Indian American organizer. Shout out to the baddie Indian organizers out here, myself included. Their experience of active solidarity with Palestinian folks came in 2017 through exchanges they facilitated between their high school students in Baltimore and students at Ramallah Friends School in the West Bank. These powerful exchanges stoked Shivani's passion for developing young people as critical thinkers grounded in revolutionary values and politics. As the Leadership Development Coordinator at Lavender Phoenix, an organization that Queer Crescent deeply loves and feels deeply supported by, and in deep kind of like siblingship with, Shivani continues this work by facilitating opportunities for trans and queer Asians and Pacific Islanders to practice values-based organizing and contribute to intersectional movements. In particular, I just want to really say that we were so excited to invite Shivani and Lavender Phoenix into our teach-in as the final speaker, because Lavender Phoenix is one organization that really models, going back to the initial motivation of this teach-in with our letter calling for a permanent ceasefire, calling on LGBTQ organizations and leaders to sign on to understanding pinkwashing and to support Palestinian liberation. Lavender Phoenix is one such organization that has really demonstrated such values-aligned solidarity with Palestinian liberation. And so I'm really excited to bring you in, Shivani, to close us out, to talk about how queer people, queer organizations can really double down on our solidarity. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Shenaaz, for that introduction, and to Queer Crescent for organizing this event. I just want to take a moment and I feel so deeply moved by the sharing from Rabab and Ghadir in this workshop, and just sitting with the lineage within all of us are organizing in as we take up Palestine as a queer issue. We have generations of lessons and decades of work and such powerful leaders here in this space, but all across the world to follow. And I feel so grateful and so excited to be joining in on this work and sharing a little bit about what Lavender Phoenix is doing in this moment. So if you haven't heard of Lavender Phoenix, we build trans, non-binary, and queer Asian and Pacific Islander power here in the Bay Area. We are a base building organization training grassroots leaders to build intersectional movements. And so as we witness an escalation of the ongoing genocide in Palestine, I can say that our base is firmly grounded in the understanding that Palestinian liberation is part of our struggle and our responsibility as trans and queer Asian and Pacific Islander people. And so I want to start by sharing a little bit about what we're doing in this moment before sharing about how our members arrived to this point. So since October 7th, we have shifted our work accordingly. We have dedicated time to mobilize our members and our broader communities to action. We have educated each other to stay politically grounded. We have and will continue to support each other to process the grief of this moment and to remember hope, optimism, and commitment. In so many facets of our work, we are stepping into deeper leadership and responsibility to support our Palestinian comrades to win. And more tangibly, across our 6 member-led committees, this looks like offering healing support, coordinating our members who are trained in protest and digital security to support our comrades, coordinating contingents at in-person and online actions, moving financial resources and funder attention to our Palestinian partners, and uplifting pro-Palestinian messaging and calls to actions using our social media reach. Next slide, please. Responding to Palestine and challenging pinkwashing is not a shift in our priorities, but it's actually a sharpening of our focus as an organization. We've organized our base over the years to recognize our interconnected struggles. And across our membership, we so deeply understand that the Palestinian struggle is our struggle, and Palestinian futures are our futures. And all of the actions we are taking right now to support Palestine, to challenge pinkwashing, are the result of so many tests, experiments, and trials that have helped us deepen our political purpose and grow our power. If we can go to the next slide. So many of these experiments and trials that we've conducted over the years really informed our current theory of change. And this is really critical to how we're organizing in this moment. Our emergent responses to sharpen contradictions in our world, like we are witnessing with Palestine, are only possible because we organize within a consistent theory of change, which I've shared here on this slide. A key part of our theory of change, and a key part of my role as leadership development coordinator, is that we are committed to developing leaders who are rooted in our values, in our history, in emotional intelligence, and compassion, because we know that is how our movement will be sustained and will be effective. So we're not just developing members and masses who care about single issues. We're developing holistic, critical thinkers who care about solidarity with all oppressed people, so that in moments like this, solidarity with Palestine is a natural choice in our larger fight for liberation. One of the really important ways we do this, and I think like this workshop is a critical example, is we educate our base, our trans and queer API base, on our history. And we dig into systems, dig into how systems of white supremacy, imperialism, colonialism, racial capitalism, and cis heteropatriarchy impact all of us across our identities in the past and in the present. Right now, the tools and tactics being wielded by fascist leaders to criminalize and punish trans people here in the US are rooted in the same white supremacist, colonial, and imperialist ideologies used to justify the dehumanization and murder of Palestinians, particularly trans and queer Palestinians. As part of our theory of change, we've also spent intentional time educating our base about revolutionary politics like abolition and healing justice, and developing our skills for safety, for healing, and resource mobilization that are applicable in moments all across our movement. So we've spent so much time since we implemented this theory of change in 2021 to build our base and grow our power so we can show up for our partners who are organizing for Palestinian liberation in this moment. We have spent so much time cultivating our skills and knowledges so we can support our movements beyond just trans liberation. Next slide, please. So I've just briefly shared, and I'm excited and curious to dive into questions, but I want to end just by sharing a little bit of a story. A few weeks ago, our members participated in a direct action that asked many of them to step into higher risk than they had before. And prior to the action, we met to get grounded together, and folks shared their fears, but they also countered those fears with a really rooted sense of purpose. So many of our members talked about how they wanted to look back on this moment and know that they and we as an organization did everything in our power to support Palestinian liberation. And they spoke about the sacred responsibility and duty we have in this moment to show up in solidarity. And I feel so moved even now, just thinking back to that moment, and feel so much gratitude to our members for taking new risks, to the generations of leaders in our organization and our movement who have led us to this point. And I feel immense admiration and gratitude to the long lineage of Palestinian queer and trans resistance and current day organizers who are guiding us right now. For Lavender Phoenix, this moment is really helping us clarify our power, and for many of our members, this moment is helping them clarify their political purpose. The things all of our Palestinian siblings are fighting for: self-determination, safety, healing, community, decolonization. These are the things that we as trans and queer API people here in the Bay Area so desire for ourselves as well. We refuse to let our transness and our queerness be co-opted for violence and displacement and genocide. And we know that our struggles and our futures are united, and we're committed to fighting alongside our Palestinian comrades until we are all free. Thank you so much for letting me share. I'll pass it back to Shenaaz.
Shivani, you better come on. Thank you so much for bringing all of it. Lavender Phoenix, I just can't swoon on y'all enough. But like, because it's so, y'all are so deeply, you model that clarity of purpose and power and grace. There's like also like such deep humility and grace to be in constant learning. And as an emerging organization, an emerging queer organization, I just have to say, like, Queer Crescent feels so deeply held by y'all, and like really inspired with like the path that you are like leading and inviting us all towards. I want to also like just so much love in the chat for you. This piece around like letting this moment sharpen the focus. It's not a pivot. I think I've even said like we're pivoting, we're in rapid response. Part of our political principles as an organization is understanding anti-Zionism as part and parcel of the white supremacist project. And so this is not a pivot, it's not a rapid response, but to your point, it's a sharpening and is a double down of our commitments, of our political principles and priorities. So thank you for naming that. Okay, we do want to get to some questions. I could say so much more, but I don't need to. Thank you to the back end folks for synthesizing some of our questions. Okay, panelists, please help me in being, what's the word? I can't even say it because I'm not this. Literally, I'm so long-winded, I can't even think of the word. Succinct. Be succinct in your responses so that we can get to as many questions as possible. Thank you to the back end for merging some of the questions. So if the questions are not exactly as you entered them, please know that we're doing our best to capture many questions in the brief 10 minutes that we have remaining. Okay, first question for Ghadir and for Rabab. For people in queer organizations, what strategies can we use to push our workplaces to call for a free Palestine, especially if members and colleagues are mainly older and white? I mean, the older part feels like shade, but just maybe not values aligned. They've shown concern about backlash against the organization and staff, as well as worries about funding. First question.
Ghadir, go.
Thank you. So my experience is with white folks that they want to save Palestinian queers. So I would say thank you, but no thank you. We don't need savings as Palestinian queers. We have managed to raise the bar within our own communities through the feminist movement, through the national movement. But we do need your active solidarity as Palestinians. So perhaps to talk about queer liberation in the sense that giving voice to the oppressed. With regards to the fears expressed, I think it's time for us to challenge and change the existing narrative and also challenge the conditioned funding imposed by funders. And Visualizing Palestine has done an incredibly important job showing how we can challenge and shift the narratives and the discourse on Palestine right now, and how can we challenge existing conditioned funding that conditions funding for organizations and silence organizations for speaking on Palestine.
I'll just add a couple. I agree with everything. I will just add a couple of things. One is that I think it's really important for folks to use their own privilege in order to do things that maybe many other people cannot. And I want to give examples both from ACT UP in the 80s that challenged everybody, and also from the recent examples of the Jewish Voice for Peace. And if not now, many anti-Zionist Jews who actually used their privilege, not like the Zionists, to say, oh, if you speak about Palestine liberation, it makes me uncomfortable and it makes me feel unsafe, but actually to go take over the Congress, take over Grand Central Station, Auckland Bridge, many other places, because they know, and I've been talking to a lot of friends, and so they know that it is the next day they were released, there is bail money available. This doesn't work. Direct action wouldn't work for communities of color, for immigrants. So it's really, really important for folks to do that. One. Secondly, I'm not suggesting that people who are in vulnerable position do that. Why? Because we also cannot afford as a movement to have yet more things to work on. So if people who have issues, they might lose their jobs, they might get attacked or something, it's okay, lay low, it's fine. You can do something behind the scenes. You don't have to do it publicly. Let the other people do it. And it's okay sometimes not to really be in the front. It's okay. But I think that's something really, really important this is the time. more people can speak up and show it. It's also really important because it also fights against homophobia, against transphobia, against all these various forms of repression of our communities. So in every single way, I think it's really, really important for folks to step up and do what they're doing.
Right. Thank you so much. Welcome, Yaffa. This next question is for the Palestinians, Ghadir, Yaffa, and Rabab. How would you describe queer life in Palestine? I'm curious if you have suggestions on how to respond to the pinkwashing propaganda that says queer people are subject to violence and oppression inside of Palestine.
You want, yeah, Ghadir. You're the
Thank
organizer.
you. I would say, yeah, Palestinians are subjected to violence in Palestine, Israel. The soldier at the blockage doesn't care what's my sexual orientation and sexual identity. He sees a Palestinian, and therefore I get oppressed. I face violence, oppression, alienation, marginalization, because I'm a Palestinian. So I think I think that queer people in Palestine, we face the same universal challenges as queer people around the world, but specific to the context of Palestine is apartheid, occupation, and settler colonialism. For us, we had one of the strategies that we used in establishing ASWAT is to center around intersectionality, because in Palestine, you can't talk about sexual and gender rights and freedoms without addressing the big elephant in the room. So the strategy that has really worked for us is to talk about intersectionality of our struggle as Palestinians living under occupation, settler colonialism, and apartheid, as women in a very militaristic society, and as queer people in the context of homophobia and pinkwashing.
I will just add a couple of things. One is, I think it's really important for us to also have a historical perspective that all the anti-sodomy laws that have been passed came from British colonialism. They were Victorian morality. In our community, I come from Nablus, and a lot of people say, well, Nablus is sort of like knows for having more queer guys and so on. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it is true or it's not true. But I do know, like I come from, say that there are relations, there are people who have connections with each other. Folks know about it. I have not seen an activist, very well-known activist, but people will say maybe hush hush, and there is no question or targeting people or like, you know, beating them up or doing anything about that. Obviously, I definitely agree that queer repression exists in all societies. But this is something that actually the British colonialism came and enforced their own Victorian morality. And then they come up with some, because historically, in the history of Islamic State, and I actually like to do a lot of research about that, one of my articles, it has not been as an issue, as big an issue as what happens after colonialism and the ways in which colonialism separate us. Definitely for Muslim, because we're talking about queer Crescent, definitely there is a lot of discussions about what do you say about the Quran? Does really the Quran say that it is, or there are other interpretations that Lot people actually were nasty, they were killing each other, they were very violent and so on, and this is why God punished them. They didn't punish them because they were actually queer. And I think it's really important for us to think about, Islam is very well known for interpretation. So if it's well known for interpretation about everything on the face of the earth, why it's not open for interpretation about this? So I think also conservative forces use this in order for them to target, and this is what happened in Egypt with the queen boat and other things. Every single time the regime wants to suppress people, they go at a target, you know, like queer folks or whatever, in order for them, see, we are with you, and try to silence. It doesn't work. So I think it's really important for us to be historical and you know, contextualize, in addition to what Ghadir said.
And name a spade, like nobody's naming Christian fascism. Like that is a huge organizing force that we have to just name. Like we can't talk about, you know, violence without talking about the system that enacts this violence, right? That has imposed these ideas is Christian fascism, right? Colonization. We are nearly at time. I want to just ask all the speakers if you have any call to actions that you want to kind of speak to the room. I wish we had more time for Q&A, but I think I want to be honoring everybody's time. So as last final thoughts, maybe take a minute or so each. Any final thoughts and call to actions if you have them.
I'll maybe start with Shivani.
Yes.
You were the last speaker.
I don't have any calls to action to uplift right now from Lavender Phoenix, but I encourage folks to continue to heed the calls to action coming out from people in Gaza, as well as any calls to action that my fellow panelists share as well. I know that many of us will be entering periods of rest as we head into the end of December, and I encourage us to find rest, but also find the endurance to continue mobilizing and showing up for solidarity in the new year, because this will be a long fight.
Rabab, let's go in reverse order.
Okay,
so
so
Rabab, Ghadir, and
yeah, so I will say I'll say a few things. That one is definitely BDS. Definitely we cannot normalize oppression, and we cannot treat it business as usual, and we cannot accept the status quo in everything we do. And that also includes the question of Palestine, includes what's going on. Secondly, shut it down for Palestine. So it is anything that people in the street are really, really important. Definitely agree with Shivani that we should not really like burn ourselves because we're in it for the long term. But I think people can take breaks, but be out. Take breaks, but be out so we don't get burned. Because, and then, you know, Emma Goldman, if I can dance in the revolution, I don't want to be part of it. I don't want to have any part in it. So we want to dance. Now we can dance, we mourn, we grieve, but I think we also really need to do that. Palestinian Feminist Collective is also coming out with multiple things, so please attend, look out for that. We will be working closely with the Queer Crescent and other groups to kind of your group, Shivani and others, to figure out what we need to do jointly. But I think it's really important to not be silent at this point.
Ghadir, and then Yaffa.
Yeah, thank you. So basically, as I said earlier, end the genocide, ask for an immediate ceasefire, end the siege on Gazans, and join Queer Cinema for Palestine. It's happening right now from December 2nd until 10th. Link shared in the chat. Thank you very much for that. Don't give up. Don't stop talking about Palestine. Don't stop talking about Gaza. You know, always go to the source. The source of violence is oppression, it's occupation, it's settler colonialism, it's apartheid. Let's work together this time, nonstop, to end occupation, to end settler colonialism, to end occupation. And Gaza and Palestine are queer issues, they're feminist issues, and it's our moral duty to continue to do whatever we can to bring justice to Palestinians, all Palestinians. Thank you so much.
Definitely want to second everything that's been shared. All of that is so critical. And I know there were some questions about how to get funds to people and things like that. And y'all, this is a genocide. Everywhere is important. This is, we're not experiencing something small where it's like, send it to this one person and we're going to be good. Everywhere is necessary right now, in particular for the work that I talked about. And I have my own issues with nonprofit status and things like that, but there is a lot of power that exists within nonprofits. And so funding through that pathway is also really critical, and we are able to still get people money unrestricted through that, but it's also important to have money completely outside of those systems. And so want to encourage folks to be really mindful of that, and just really wanted to highlight as a final thing of when we're talking about pinkwashing, when we're talking about all of what's happening within the broader LGBTQ community right now, what that means is that me as an executive director of a queer and trans Muslim org, in the past, when someone comes to me who's a queer and trans Palestinian and asks for mental health support or housing support or legal support or food support, whatever kind of support, usually there are queer and trans organizations I can send people to. Now, I don't know many organizations I can send people to, right? So people who have been receiving services for housing, for food, for employment, for all the different things, the broader community is no longer safe for us to be able to do that. And this isn't new, but right now the violence is so high that all of those things need to be created separately outside of those things now. And so just wanted to highlight that. Really appreciate everyone here and all the panelists. Y'all are amazing.
Thank you all so deeply from everyone at Queer Crescent. We want to just thank you for your time, your commitment, your organizing, and your endurance in this long, long fight towards a free Palestine. Remember, y'all, we resist pinkwashing now and until liberation. Keep learning, keep studying, keep talking about it. Thank you to the folks on the back end of Queer Crescent, Saba, Amara, Faizan, the whole team. Thank you to all the folks that hold the folks here to make us show up, that nurture us, that feed us, that help us feel a sense of home. Thank you to everyone who touches upon our lives and towards your protection and safety. Thank you all so much for joining us. I guess I end it now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone. This is beautiful.
Are we?
Actually,
we're
can we
no
stay
longer-
on for a debrief for a minute? But
Yeah,
maybe
okay. So we're
Yeah,
not live anymore, right? It's just
Yeah.
let me stop the recording.
it's just us, right?